Good evening. Today is Thursday, March 21st. This meeting is being recorded by WCTV and Jamie Wixton. Would you please stand for the pledge? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, our meeting has been called to order, and we have our special guest entering right now. We're going to move up good news to first on the agenda tonight. So we'll let everybody get seated and ask the assistant coaches to come on in. So welcome. We would like to thank the members of the boys basketball team and the coaching staff for coming here tonight. As a representative, as chairman of the school committee, it is our pleasure to congratulate you on being the Division IV state champions with an overall record of 23-3. You're the first Wareham team to ever to win back-to-back state championships. So that is an honor. I don't see too many other teams doing that down the road. Hopefully someday. This team was just ranked third in the Boston Herald overall in the entire state, all divisions. And interestingly enough, the team that was ranked first, Charlestown, you guys know, you beat them in the regular season by a point. So you really, I think Wareham's been on the map, but you really highlighted Wareham again against all competitors, private schools, Catholic schools, all divisions from the whole state. You guys should really be proud of yourselves. And the thing that I like about this team is you guys put team glory ahead of individual glory. This was a deep team. That was the trademark of this team, the depth. And it's hard to find playing time for so many players, so many good players. The bench could have started for most other teams. The bench would have defeated most other teams, certainly in the South Coast, and probably some even in the tournament. So you guys made that team stronger by battling the first group every single day in practice. Also, I'd just like to say that most importantly, all of you played as a team. You played unselfishly, and you had a goal. You had a lot of pressure on you, and you overcame that pressure, and you achieved that goal. You responded, you delivered, and you represented your families, your school, your town proudly the whole way. It was exciting watching you guys. You're a very, very, very good basketball team. You should be proud of yourselves, and you're going to remember this for the rest of your lives. You had that team from Wareham come to talk to you from 2002 that lost to Lynn Tech. That loss is still burning in them, and they kind of living vicariously through you guys. So congratulations. I don't know if any other member of the committee would like to say something to this group. Joyce?
I would just like to say congratulations. It was a lot of fun to watch you play all year long. And most of all, you represented our community, you players, the coaches, everyone. You represented our community, all of us, in such a positive way. And I just want to say thank you for that, too.
Haverhill?
And again, congratulations. I know I've watched a lot of you guys grow up from JBA up until now. I didn't realize so many of your seniors, but one of my favorite moments watching some of the footage from after the game was how many of you went to the stands and immediately went to your parents. And that just goes to show that, one, that you really, really appreciate the support that they've all given you, and that is also a huge representation of this community. So I thought that was pretty awesome to see, and congratulations.
Jeff?
Wow. So I was, as you guys probably know, I'm also a coach. I had a team that lost one match in 2 years. They were a very special group of players. They did not win a state championship. And then you guys did it twice. To say I'm impressed is an understatement, because I know you after the first time you won the match, your state championship. You set yourself a target for winning it a second time, and I certainly understand why you would, because you were a bunch of juniors at that time. But to set yourself that goal and then to achieve it, and to achieve it in such, in many ways, spectacular fashion is extraordinary, and I think you have created a legacy that will be remembered for a long time. I won't begin to understand the basketball as much as Coach Brigioli does, but I understand champions. I will also say that the basketball team also set itself apart for being great students. That's not always the case for a high school team. So you should be really proud of yourselves for that reason as well, because not only have you demonstrated an ability to work together, a level of skill, but also a level of commitment to your entire life, because it may seem like basketball is, a big part of your life now, but I'm sure you know that at some point it will just be great memories, and you will have other lives, and your excellence as students is going to carry you a long way. So you have my admiration and my congratulations.
Brennan?
And I want to join the board in saying congratulations to you guys. I'm a former Wareham athlete myself, so proud to see my Vikings win, back-to-back state championships. And, the best thing I can say to you guys is just take this with you. You guys are a team. You may have played your last game together, but that doesn't mean your team breaks up. Help and support each other through the rest of the year, going on to college. Make sure that, these bonds that you guys have right now, as friends and teammates, they'll last you your whole life. You'll always have this shared memory that no one else is going to be able to say they had. So, keep supporting each other, and just know that not just the school committee, not just the school, but the community, the town of Wareham is proud of you guys. I've heard people talking about it. I was at work when you guys, came back into town, and, I realized you won. I was working in my restaurant, and everyone there, people that don't have kids that go to Wareham, they were like, did the basketball team win? Did they win back-to-back? I mean, they knew about it. So even people in this town that don't have kids going to Wareham were rooting for you, were aware of you guys, and they are proud of you. So hopefully you can take that with you. Congratulations.
All right, thank you. So we have a few tokens up front that we're going to pass out. I'm going to call the members of the team. After I call your name, I'd ask you to come in front here in a semicircle, and we'd just like to take a group photo with members of the school committee so we can grab onto your glory a little bit as well. Okay?
Are we going? Is that what that was?
I don't know.
Oh, come on.
Let's start with, we'll start with the players first, and I'd like to give everyone you have a team photo, and you have this gift, which is a basketball keychain talking about the key to success is action, and basically the key to action is perseverance. And you guys demonstrated both. So if I call you, you come up, I'll get this, and make a semicircle behind me, please. Is Amari here? Amari Rose? Freshman decided not to come tonight. Okay. Aaron Cody. We have Jace LaPointe. Jace Travers. Will Halloran. Two-handed dunk? After the buzzer? That was good. AJ Lopes. AJ was also the Collins Award winner. He was the first Wareham player to ever win that award. And that's a lot of good. Jaquan Pittman. Antoine Crossan. Kyle Susko. Diego Mello. And Taj Lupina. let's not forget your coaches who worked hard with you all year and basically showed you how to get this job done. Let's see, Darian does not look like he's here tonight, but let's go with Jawan Gamble. Jamie Sylvia. Let's go with Aaron Baptiste. Next is our next head football coach, also Cy Barito. And last, can't forget our principal and AD, Ed Roderick. Mr. Palladino. And the person who had the most pressure on him than anybody in this room is Coach Faniel. Congratulations, Coach Faniel. Squeeze in here as well. We'll take one big
I'd get
photo.
in front of them if I were you.
I'd have no choice.
Yeah, exactly. They need to all stand in front.
I look like a kindergarten kid in front of all of these children. I'm the shortest.
Repeat. Thank you, guys. Hey. What's that? I meant male. I will make that correct. Thank you. I do want to make one slight correction. I said no Wareham athlete has never won the Cowens Award from Wareham. I should have said no male Wareham athlete because Amber Filkins won it back in the day. Well-deserved award for her, by the way. Thank you, Ms. Bakayaki, for pointing that out. I should have known that. I did know that.
She has a habit of doing those things. She knows everything.
All right, we'll move on to public participation. Does anyone wish to address the committee? Seeing no one here to do so, we will move on to the student representative report. And seeing no student representative, we will move on to the Student Opportunity Act presentation.
Well, while Andrew's walking up there, can I just share my good news?
Sure. I'm sorry. Go right ahead.
Jeff and I were able to get to the Bluefoot Cafe to see the art presentation by Wareham High School that's going on there. So I encourage everyone to go down. It's such a great community partnership where they're displaying the art, first by the middle school and now by the high school. Again, always amazed, because I have zero artistic ability. And still talking about the arts, the middle school concert was last week too. Again, they always do such a great job with the band and the chorus at the middle school. So kudos to Ms. Francesi and everyone who made that happen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
All right, good evening, everyone. I passed out the latest draft of the working document, Student Opportunity Act. I've received feedback from various people, but one of that was, I think, very important was that Jesse Clements from CPAC actually helped a great deal in commenting on the actual document itself, and so I've added that. And then Kevin had pointed out a couple of typos and a word I needed to add, so that's been done, which is, I'm grateful, always grateful for that feedback.
Quick question. We got two versions of this.
Why?
I got one that is a DESI.
Yeah, that's just explaining what it is.
That's just explaining what it is. So-
It's one page kind of explaining what it is and what we're supposed to do. And then the rest is the report that we have to write.
Yeah, but I got two different files, so I guess I can skip through DESI's explanation and then go to something that's specifically related to Wareham Public Schools, but there's still, okay.
This is Wareham's, this is the DESI,
No,
the two files.
the DESI includes the explanation along with the draft report.
Exactly, so which one do you want?
The draft report,
Okay,
or the PowerPoint. We're doing the PowerPoint now. so
The
you have
other
that
one,
as well.
no, it's different.
there was a lot of similarities, obviously.
But he's right, we do have one that looks more like a presentation and one that looks more like a document.
Correct. You got them both,
Yes. They have the same information. I'm
correct?
sorry.
Okay,
So the legislature approved a change to Chapter 70 funding formula, calling it the Student Opportunity Act. It was passed, the act, in 2019, and it ushered a new phase in the Commonwealth's commitment to ensure that every student in the state experiences high-quality learning opportunities that lead to success in school and post-secondary success, quote, unquote. Districts are required to identify a subset of overall initiatives and submit the plan. And these are the requirements of the plan. We have to, we need to create evidence-based plan for reducing persistent disparities in achievement across student groups. To summarize our district plan, analyze the data, identify strategies for improving student achievement, engage families, caregivers, and other stakeholders, and select evidence-based programs and strategies to address disparities in achievement. So after I looked at the data, we chose, after much discussion, to target our special education population. Because there's quite a disparity in the proficiency rating as we compare the special education population to our general education population. The special education and proficiency are around single-digit numbers, and our general education are double digits when we're talking about MET and proficient. Met and exceed, sorry, I went backwards from the old MCAS, but the met and exceed column is in trouble across the state. It's that way everywhere. So we need to do something differently. So we're looking at how we'll go about doing that. So we've been incorporating multi-tiered systems of support and practices for a very long time, mostly at the elementary school with our early literacy work that we've done. And we had to be really creative in how we did that because we didn't have money for interventionists or coaches or many of those other things. So we did a model where we would split kids out into groups, have a teacher that might not be their teacher, dedicated to making sure that students were achieving the skills that they needed. And that seems to be what many of the middle school does some of that work as well, and it seems to work in our use of a multi-tiered system of support without spending money, which is important. And we want to develop and expand collaborative teaching models. We have some co-teaching, evidence-based models that leverage collaboration, serve students with disabilities best. The three-year summary is basically special education students across the district will be targeted for accelerated improvement. We have already begun to invest in this by offering high-quality instruction materials coupled with coaching provided by TNTP, which is the LAN network that comes and observes and reports out at the high school at the moment. And early literacy utilizes elements of science of reading, which began in 2017. We started collecting data in 2014, and we purchased high-quality materials in 2023. And the high-quality materials are Tier 1 instruction, which there's no longer, students in our district are at grade level in all classes with the materials that we've chosen. And within there are ways in which they can scaffold. This is the proficiency data. This is just special education students compared to other special education students across the state. And as you can see, when you compare ELA to Wareham and ELA the state, there's quite a disparity, as well as some in math. But what I think is more interesting is this chart. So growth is a criterion reference measure. It measures us against ourselves every year, and that way we can see through that measure whether or not what we're doing is making any difference. When you compare ourselves to everyone else in the state, it's harder to figure out necessarily with the bigger number how or what it is that's working or not working. When you're looking at growth, we say, oh, what are we doing? And as you can see, which is really intriguing to me, we beat the state in every grade in math, in growth, and some, I would say fairly significantly, in many areas. This is just special education students too, just so you know, it's that cohort. And then in English, the middle school has beat the state in grades 5, 6, and 7 in English. So as we start to look at this data, we start to ask ourselves, what are we doing? What's working? What should we continue doing? And how do we continue to improve? So it gives us like in the moment information that makes it much more useful to how we decide we're going to proceed.
So is that number, when you talk about the ELA or the math growth for Wareham Public School students, that's the SGP number from the state? Okay.
Yep,
All right.
and I just want you to keep in mind that both cohorts are just special education students.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not the whole. So the strategies to improve, we're planning to offer training for department chairs, assistant principals, and inclusion staff to accelerate learning for all special education inclusion students. We'll continue to explore new curriculum materials, our new materials, which is CKLA, Amplified, Bridges, Math, Study Sync, Century, and Illustrative Math, and expose special education students to the proper tools to access them and accelerate learning. Offer professional development using these materials to ensure special education students have equitable access to high-quality educational experiences, and continue collecting and analyzing data to make data-informed decisions. Basically, what MTSS is, we look what individuals need, we look what small group needs, and look at whole class needs, and then cater to each of those in our delivery of learning. For this, engaging families, we want to ensure a plan that's culturally sensitive and responsive. We do offer virtual and in-person meetings for many of our meetings because we found that a lot of people would prefer virtual, so we offer that readily. We have monthly meetings with PTO, CPAC, school council, and leadership for transparent communication. We provide formal and informal engaging opportunities, removing barriers. So for example, our Title I has a family engagement element, and so that's run by Jane Vondulis, and she has her grandparent nights and other things that happen in her monthly meetings with families, and they offer food and babysitting and all of that, so that we can continue to keep people engaged. And then we also host various other topics for families in our community, both in-person and virtual workshops. So this year, we took the vocal survey that students take in grades 4, 5, and 8, and I thought I'd make it family-friendly, the survey, so I took those questions and I replicated them in a family way. I think I sent it to you, April, to take a look. I don't remember, but anyway. The surveys we've done in the past have been okay, but this one, I think we can relate to kids and to parents. We can kind of see the contrast because the questions are similar, and the state has actually created that survey, which is taken by students after their MCAS testing. And so we gather those results, and we have the results, and I think probably Dr. DeAndrea will provide them, when they're ready to be provided, but we had 253 people respond. So it's a decent amount. It's not as many as we would like, but it's a beginning. So and we did another one last year, but I think this one will get to the crux of a sense of belonging and communication and all of the areas that we really want to help our families get to more often. And then I think we need a consistent system of attendance and participation in any events we hold at the schools. How many families showed up, right? Which events were most popular? Why? Can we combine some events so that it's not out 2 nights in a month, or if families have children at multiple schools, can we schedule them differently? Can we do something else, right, to make it more welcoming to families? But we need to see where we are with that, and then hopefully learn and do something about it so that they can feel better. So the stakeholders that were included in the draft plan include the superintendent and leadership team, special education parent advisory council, the principals communicated with the school councils, shared with department chairs and some staff. We posted the draft SOA plan and an invitation to tonight's meeting on our website and on all the social media sites from each school, and so that they could come if they chose to speak about the plan. And then, of course, this public presentation to all of you. And these are they ask in the plan what our evidence-based programs and strategies are currently. So many of you know them already, but obviously we have a strategic plan and school improvement plans, and we have a robust data collection and analysis system. We purchased high-quality instructional materials. We have a robust evaluation system that generates over 1,000 walkthroughs annually. School support colleagues as they observe other colleagues within the classroom. We're implementing high-quality, evidence-based literacy curriculum materials for all English and math grades pre-K through 10, so every student has access. We use valid, formal, and teacher-directed assessments to identify instructional needs and monitor progress. We differentiate, scaffold, accommodate the core curriculum, and ensure equitable student access. We implement evidence-based interventions to address individual student needs and provide initial and ongoing professional development that we'll continue to do. Any questions?
Jeff?
So I guess I have 3 major, did you want to go first?
No, you
Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I guess I have 3 major areas of questions. Let's start with go down a few slides, where the comparison to the state on the
Proficiency or growth?
met and exceeded. So I just did some rough calculations, and, well, not particularly rough. We are, on average, about 45% below the state performance, meaning if you average our percentage and compare it to the state, and average all 6 grades that are used, 45% is terrible, and I think you know it. So as I'm sitting there thinking, not tonight, but earlier in the week, thinking about the 45% below the state average, I'm thinking, the one problem I have with the calculation of this as it applies to special education students is it fair to say that not all special education students are created equal? Just as where you are on, for example, the autism spectrum can range from, pretty proficient all the way down to not proficient at all in terms of the ability to learn. Mm-hmm. So do we know that our special education population, which is 45% below the state average, are they struggling because of their disabilities to a greater extent than the typical average SPED student in the state?
I don't know the actual answer. We have 28% of our population is special education,
I
which
know that.
contributes to the 45%, right? When you're looking at all the students
No.
overall.
That shouldn't be true in this particular
No, but if
calculation.
I thought you were talking about our overall
No,
percentage.
I'm talking about this
Okay, so,
slide.
I believe that in the last couple of years, research has shown that if we teach below grade level, it doesn't do anyone any favors. So what we're trying to do is accelerate learning opportunities, teaching at grade level, regardless, and then scaffolding that information so that students have access. Because if you're never given access, we never know if they know to the level that they need to. So the goal is to sort of break down the barriers and open the door and help our staff and everyone involved walk students through by grade level so that they have access to that opportunity. And so,
I get that, but it's not working. And
well,
I'm-
we've just begun that. I mean, this just started last year. I went to every webinar, and we've just had TNTP come in and the LAN network, and like, we're all just learning about this change in practice.
I can't speak to that, but I'm just saying these data says what Wareham is doing, and I suspect many other districts are, but Wareham is 45% below the average. So what we're doing, at least through 2023, is not working.
Correct, which is why I'm targeting.
I get it. So what is it about our students that is causing it not to work? Do we have particularly acute disabilities compared to the average student across the state? I'm trying to literally come up with a reason why we would be 45%. I'm not about to sit here and indict all the special education staff and say, why are you failing? Okay? I'm trying to say maybe it is some other factors that is not taken into consideration with respect to these data. Can you think of anything that we're not taking into account that would cause us to be 45% below?
I will get back to you.
I have a clarifying question. Is there a way, so this is the state as a whole, like every district in the state? Are you, Oh, sorry. So this is the district, the state averages, like
In
every
special
single.
education, yeah.
Right. But every district is going to have, as Jeff pointed, a different percentage of, like, we have a high need population, like a higher percentage. Is there a breakdown that DESE has where it's not every district, but every district comparable to our district? Are those numbers more similar, or?
Sort of like a DART report.
We have.
Right, because if this is like on a whole, and a school has like, say, a 1% population, of course it's gonna be more diluted. So I feel like it's sort of like apples and oranges. It's kind of not, it's too broad, I think.
He has the dart.
Dr.
So
Dandria? you
I have exactly what you're, because I had the same question.
Because I feel like that would make it clearer to what Jeff's
How
asking.
do we compare to like districts? And I just
What's the
have
definition of like?
A percentage as high as ours.
demographics.
Except that these are all special. So what you're saying
But we're
to
doing-
April's point is, they're not only special ed, but they're high needs, for example.
Right, so to answer your question, a disability is a disability, okay?
But it's not.
Whether you live in Wellesley or you live in
Oh.
Wareham, okay?
By state,
However, there could be crossover between special ed and low income.
and that's what I'm asking.
Yes.
Something that would
So
help.
that most definitely would impact it. I'm happy to pass this around. I just did that on my own, taking the DART groups, the DART districts, and comparing them to us and seeing.
Just a special ed from each of those. Okay.
Exactly.
We're better than some, and so,
So I think the challenge is, yes, it's a special ed population, but there's a crossover of low income also.
So what you're saying, were you satisfied that if you take the high needs, low income population and add it to the mix in terms of trying to understand the 45%, were you satisfied that the 45% is not nearly as bad as it looks because it's not comparing to like populations in other respects?
Yes, I mean, I'm not satisfied with the results, but if we look at like districts, they're having the same challenge we are having.
So that was my first major concern. My second major concern, if you could go to the next slide, is I used to be a big fan of SGP. But there's a point at which if you're growing faster than some other group, at a certain point over the number of years, that you should catch up. So if you're continuously having a better SGP, but you're still, in this case, 45% behind, at some point the SGP starts to not be meaningful. In other words, what good is growth if you never get to where you're trying to go? And do you see my point?
I do, and I believe that proficiency is key, no matter what.
Exactly.
However, it's too big for us to be able to determine year by year or moment by moment the choices that we have to make and how we're implementing information, and then get a good read on that based on, and so if we use it to guide where we're going, at least we know we're closer to proficiency if we have grown versus if we're not. So we have to use the criterion reference data, because we can only really compare ourselves to ourselves, because that we control. We control how we teach, we control what we give to the students, we control what groups they're in, how we deliver, the data we collect. Like, that's all very valuable to us. So for me, when I saw this, even in our presentation with our lovely scores the beginning of the year, this was different when I looked at subgroups and I saw where they were as compared to the state. It gives you a glimmer of being able to say, we're on to something. It's not for no reason that we've implemented these things. And we can see it. And the goal, obviously, is to keep that moving so that they're proficient, so that they can adequately compete with anyone and everyone out there when they leave.
Would you agree that the concept of differentiated instruction is even more critical with a special education student than a general ed student?
Yes, I mean, it's critical for all students, but yes.
I understand.
Yes.
But, you know,
Our special education staff have a bag full of tricks. They're really, really talented, and they can actually assist the general education teacher to reach students, right? So their education provides them with tools and
they're actually
strategies.
giving regular teachers the tools to differentiate their instruction,
Yes, for the special education
because it's that much
students.
more important.
Yes.
And then the final area that I found almost disturbing, and maybe it's because of my healthcare background, is when I look at the strategies, I'm trying to imagine this student, or even this group of students, sitting in front of me, and instead of them being students, I tend to think of them as patients, okay? And they've got a disease. I'm not suggesting SPED students have a disease, but in my world, you know, if you're in the healthcare system, you've got a disease that they're trying to cure. And I'm trying to imagine that this doctor is trying 6 different pharmaceuticals: CKLA, Amplify, Bridges Math, Study Sync, Century, and Illustrative Math. It just seems like these are trials, drug trials, you know, to see what works, right? Because there's such a sense of desperation because things aren't working. And that's almost frightening to me, that we're trying 6 different curriculum materials because our differentiated instruction, no matter how noble the effort, isn't working because we're 45% below. So we're trying differentiated curriculum instead of instruction. And why in 2024 is the nation, the state, Wareham in this case, still trying differentiated curriculum almost like it's a drug trial? I know
It isn't.
Except it isn't.
Because they're vetted and they've researched, and we've spent years looking at each of these elements. We looked.
But why are we trying 6 different?
They're not different. CKLA and Amplify are the same thing. They're the same company. CKLA is for the younger students and what they need, and Amplify then brings
so
them
the-
through. So
Okay,
that's
so
the
the
same.
different grade levels.
Yes,
Okay,
But-
And subject areas.
yes.
Some-
And then, so that's English, and then we have math.
that's helpful, okay.
And then they're all age, so you have to, when you research, you have to look for the age level that you're, right, that you're trying to accommodate.
I got it.
So that's why we've chose, but Study Sync is through middle high school, all the way through. And so I think it
Fair
looks
point.
bigger
Fair point.
than it is.
It's, you know, if I'm frustrated, I can imagine how much frustration you have and the teachers in trying to get through to this really important group of students.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Joyce?
Some of my questions are about funding.
Okay.
So the 582 is for 3 years. Is that guaranteed? Is
That's,
that-
no, so there's no money.
Okay.
It's infused into Chapter 70.
Okay.
And when they passed the ruling in 2019, I don't know if you remember, maybe, I think you do. So I did a presentation,
I
we were going to
remember,
do
and there was a
paras,
small amount of money for the
67,000,
paras, yep,
okay?
yep.
When I asked about it with them this time around, they didn't want any, they want you to mention what you would spend in your Chapter 70 funding for the targeted group, but there's no extra money, because we didn't, we got $67,000,
I
right?
was gonna say, so 582 divided by 3 is more than 67. So
Right.
that's-
So what I
You don't understand infusion?
Yeah, so what I did,
it's like-
so what I tried to do was just take what we already, a lot of what we already do with the people that we already have in place,
Right,
and then we've been focusing our professional development anyway with special education and other areas, so we'll do even more focus, and then talk to a couple of providers to see if they can work with our leadership and our inclusion staff, right? So, and then some general ed as we move through. But what I just did approximately what we spend on those people, and that's the amount for that, for what we spend in that anyway.
so the $120,000 for staff to provide high-quality instruction is just what we're already paying
Yes.
folks who already do that job.
Yes, because there was no money to speak to it, but they wanted the plan.
Okay,
I
It's
share your
crazy.
confusion.
Yeah,
So-
and I was confused, which is
So
why I
when they
called them.
passed it back in 2019,
It was
my
money.
understanding was it was an attempt to, because Chapter 70 formula had not been updated in many, many years. And so they wanted to update it to be more appropriate to today's needs. Part of the deal was that the legislature said, we will increase Chapter 70, but we expect
A plan.
districts to tell us how they're going to address the most needy kids. So they don't really say, you know, how much we've increased it, or what monies are specific. They just said, we're going to include it in Chapter 70, and we want to know how you're going to address the most needy kids. So every district has to do this. By April 1st, we have to submit a plan to how we're addressing these high-needs kids, and that's,
okay.
Yes, it's interesting.
Yeah, it just doesn't make much sense, but, so the family engagement that you're talking about is things that you're already doing. You don't have extra money to do anything more than what you're doing.
Except, and maybe if Title I, depending upon our allocation, I might be able to put some money from Title I into that bucket, which I always try to fund. So we'll see what we can do, but no, there's no, obviously, there's no money, so we're just, I think what they want to know is that we're aware, that we know where our kids are, we see the data. And, my question is, well, do you want school improvement plans? Oh, no, we don't want that. We know you have them. So, okay, because we have a plan.
Because
So-
this would be part of the school improvement plan. I mean, this goes into
Yes.
much more detail for this
For
group
that group
of
of
students,
students, right.
but it would be, okay.
But it's part, right, so it's part of the whole, and they just want this subset of information. And they
Okay.
want to know that we know,
Okay.
that we've looked.
April?
Oh,
I'm sorry, Joyce, go ahead.
Sorry, so just, so clearly, this focuses on the special ed population, but our director of special ed is not here. Is she part of this plan? Is this, okay,
Yes, she and I talked about this for quite a while. When we first received the information, I think we had 3 different ideas about what to do. We were going to do all 3 of the initiatives, but it was just too big. So, and, you know, when we looked at, there's a heat map that they send you, so you can really dig down and look at data. When I started to look at that more closely, and I started to talk to Melissa about my concerns overall about the achievement or proficiency ratings, she agreed. She was part of reading it. She sent it to Jesse initially, the CPAC. And so she's been involved
okay,
the whole time.
all right, thank you.
Sure.
April?
So is the hope, I know that at the MASC conference, there was a lot of talk and breakouts about Chapter 70 and funding and legislative conversation, whether or not there's resolutions coming, or this is part of what Matt had mentioned about the updates, that it hadn't been updated in quite some time. Do you believe that them wanting this very specific breakdown, especially with the next 3 years funding totals, that they legislatively are looking at what districts are currently doing in hopes to get a more accurate picture to hopefully, fingers crossed, potentially increase Chapter 70?
I don't think so. I think that because they gave us the money, they want the report.
Okay.
Because they approved the money, they wanted something in return for the money. Nothing is free, right? So they
Right.
added the money, and now they've decided that they want this report. And so we create the report justifying the money.
Thank you.
Yep.
Brennan?
I'm not quite sure I understand all this, so if my
okay.
question doesn't make sense, forgive me, but part of this plan is to identify, you know, using all these curriculums is to identify when there's problems, right? And to be able to more focus on, you know, if you see the particular group or grade is doing poorly, you can take action, I'm assuming, right? I'm looking at the data here and I'm seeing that, like, you know, in 7th grade math, for example, you know, the percentage is 2 versus a statewide of 10. Like, first of all, I can't imagine why, and it seems to continue on. Like, you know, apparently after 6th grade, we're not doing a great job of teaching our kids math, according to this. And I'm just wondering, like, what is the mechanism by which we identify that and go, okay, well, we see there's a problem here, and what's the next step to resolve it? Because, I mean, I remember when I was looking through this the other day, when I saw that number, I mean, it literally jumped out at me. And I mean, I understand that it could be just a combination of factors, but a 2 is a pretty low number, and that was really worried. You know, my son's in special education, so I see that and I go, whoa, what happened there? And I just want to know, when you say that, you know, we look at so that we can make improvements and make these little fine-tuned adjustments, what is the adjustment? How do you react to that? How does this program, this plan, react to that?
Well, a lot of it is outside of the program. It's the data that we collect. And we have formal processes for collecting that data. And then we have data meetings where teachers actually look at the data and then and decide what instruction is necessary. We've put in ST Math, which is a supplemental program that was presented here.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, part of how we're moving the needle a bit in the right direction. I go back, I look at our math scores with the younger students, and they're doing phenomenally well, and I'm curious about that. Just generally speaking overall, you know, they do really well in math, and I think, what's up with that? And where's the disconnect? And then where do we move from there? So we look at a lot of different elements to make decisions based on what to do about anyone struggling.
Okay.
So, and we'll continue that path.
I mean, again, that's kind of, you know, like I said, just, I see a glaring kind of like spot there, and I tried looking through the rest of it, and, you know, maybe I just didn't understand it, but I didn't understand what the process actually, what is the work done when you identify a problem? what do we do about, how do we go
We
about
have
doing
a
it?
small group, and we've got Viking block, and we have all these different elements happening in the school, right? Intervention blocks that are not true, they're small groups.
Do they
where-
work?
They seem to be working, so, at the moment.
Okay.
We're looking really closely at the things that we've done, because we've done a few things to solve the problem, and so it's not a one-off. Like, you can't say, well, we did this and that happened. We have to say, we've done this, this, and this, and we see something moving. We see that there's change happening. Kids at the middle school happen to love math suddenly, and that's a huge difference than it was even 3 years ago, 4 years ago. But they seem to have they are excited about math. So that alone is different than my experience in 10 years. That's not been true. So,
My son got an A+ in Algebra 2, I couldn't believe it.
yeah, I mean, it's just, there's something going on, and we want to grab it, we know what we're doing, and we want to just keep track to make sure that we're not missing anyone or anything as we go ahead. So, I can't explain it. If a student is on an ed plan because they have a math disability, then in my mind, they should be proficient in English. If there's an English goal that, right, if they're on a disability for English, they should be proficient in math. I'm not sure what's going on in there, but we need to dig in and figure it out. Because if we're just, if we're grouping and we're not looking closely at those areas and writing goals that we can then see improvement over time, then we need to look at that too. There are just a lot of elements that we need to see and make changes. It's not going to be easy, but this is the plan.
As long as there's a plan in place.
Well, yeah.
And I just had one other question about this. Now, I know that this report, we're specifically focusing on the special needs students, but is this kind of like a template for how we'll be able to work with the non-special needs kid, the other kids that aren't, we're talking about special education here, but what about the other students that go to
They have
school?
access to
Is this
all.
the same kind of plan, basically, that we're going to use for them as we will for our special needs, or?
Yes, because it's all tier 1 information that every student is getting. And I think what's happened in the past is that because some students struggle, they move them lower, they'll go down, rather than having them at tier 1 and then scaffolding. It's a real shift in how we think about helping students. And I think it's a shift that has to happen across the state. It's not just Wareham.
Yeah.
It's everywhere. So we just need to think about, what access we're giving students, and then how are we helping them access at their grade level? And what do we need to do to make sure they're ready before they, what do we have to do in K, pre-K, K, 1, 2, as we move through? So
Okay,
we'll see.
thank you.
Jeff, you have another follow-up?
So, fantasize, you have unlimited funds. What would you do with those unlimited funds? And what would be your level of confidence that with those unlimited funds, you could raise those net and exceeds up to the state average?
That's a good question, because I'm wrapping my head around all the different elements connected to what is necessary for the special ed. I do not have the answer, and I think that's frustrating to me because I would like to have an answer, but I do know that if we embed PD that is high quality, right, and it's not one and done, it's not just this quick, speech, everybody thinks it's great and then walks away, but that they become part of our system where they're walking through and they're coaching and they're seeing where the discrepancies might be or how to diagnose appropriately so that we can offer that student what they need, the intervention that they need at the time. That would be amazing. I've seen it work with our kids before, generally. And I think if we could focus on that type of embedded professional development with someone that has, that can prove that they know something, right, about this particular population, then that would be wonderful. So I may find that with Title II money, like I may find parts of it with other funding, but we're still doing something regardless of
realize-
the money.
we say somewhat derisively, you know, they gave us money and then they wanted a report. You know,
Well,
it's their
That's being accountable.
it's their ineffectual effort to hold people accountable for getting money. But your answer, I appreciate your honesty and your candor. If I was a legislator, I would feel very uncomfortable adding money when the very person with the expertise, knowledge, and passion to make things better isn't exactly sure what she would do with that money.
But the state doesn't know. Their data is
Well, I'm not suggesting the
horrific.
state knows.
No one
But-
no one's doing a
But what I
good
am
job.
suggesting is the state hears someone else who isn't sure what to do with the money, they're going to be that much more reluctant to give more money because there's always some other place to put money in when the finite pie, you know, is being distributed. So I think it's a really, really difficult problem that not just Wareham is facing, which is public education is struggling.
Yes.
And it's not clear to me at all that money is going to solve the problem. Now,
It's never gotten in our way prior. In the last 10 years, we've never had money and we still carry on. I mean, we still make it happen for kids. We do what we need to do for kids.
there's a famous lawsuit in New Jersey. The highest spending per student was not succeeding. And so a bunch of parents filed suit in the Supreme Court in New Jersey saying, hey, you're spending more than anybody else and you're not succeeding, so give me the money and we'll take the money, essentially vouchers they were asking for, right?
Yeah.
So it's not clear at all, and that's my home state, that money solves the problem. And your first idea was in fact to help the teachers be better at instruction by giving them more professional education. That may be absolutely accurate, and you know better than I do, but it's, this is a conundrum. I'm all set, thank you.
I'd say extend the school day and the school year for certain students would be how I'd use the money, and to get teachers
Well, they
with better
already do that with
strategies.
extended school year for that population has that in our district already.
And the research on that is mixed, which is kind of interesting as well. I think it depends on the quality of what it is you're offering.
Correct.
It has to be really, really good quality.
I think it's,
All right, we'll let April ask the last
Yeah, I
question
just-
or comment, and we'll wrap this one up.
I'm wondering with the, trying to think of how to word this correctly. With the push, especially post-COVID, on teachers needing to focus as they should, because of the high, also social emotional needs of so many students, both in this population and in the regular population, that the expectation of the teachers to not only educate, but counsel and be, therapist, be social worker, on top of figuring out these pieces of information so that they're testing in the growth that the state wants them to grow, as we should. Obviously, I know we're not thrilled with where we are. But kids are the education now is completely different than the education I had, completely different from the education we all had. Every one of us is of a different era, which I think makes us a really well-rounded group, right? We all had a different educational experience. But the teachers weren't worried about my social emotional health when I was in school. It was, this is the lesson. Your parents had that side of things, or your physician, or whatever outside sources that you had. Do you think that the focus, especially even coming from the state, especially more post-COVID, on the push for the social emotional shift and well-being is taking away from some of the more education-specific criteria that these tests are now measuring?
I'm not really sure. I mean, the state's also pushing this accelerated learning. Seriously, the company that they've hired has done some extensive research, and I attended every webinar. I read their research. I wanted to make sure they were valid, because I don't always trust the information that I get. And so I really wanted to figure out, is this the way, does it make sense? My answer to some of the SEL is that if students are learning, and then they're not frustrated. If they know what they're supposed to know, then it stops a lot of that kind of angst that happens with kids. They hate reading, and then they learn how, and then they love reading. It's just, we've seen it happen. So, I mean, I know I'm probably hyper-focused on academics. I know I am hyper-focused on academics. We're a school, and I think it's extremely important. And I'm not saying that relationships aren't important. They are. They're extremely important. Kids need to know that they belong and that we care about them. But most importantly, they need to know things. And they need to know what to do with the things when they know them. So if we don't really hyper-focus on what's essential for them for the rest of their life, navigating, I think that we're not doing them the best service that we can.
And I agree with that 100%. I just didn't know if, because it's like you're getting told by the state to like focus on this a lot and then focus on this a lot. Like it's,
Yes.
they're deeming everything that they want you to
Everything's
focus
important.
on. It's almost like at the same level. So I didn't
Correct.
know if that focus is and if that focus has made its way into the test. And if that's where the differential is coming up, because it's not showing that while, yes, that particular level of growth is this, compared to this level that you also deemed equally important for funding is this, like where do they,
Draw the line.
right, where do they balance that out? So I just wasn't sure if that was, and then there was so much talk about MCAS's validity in general, and, you know,
Well, I
how
could
many
tell you, it's
people in the
not,
state-
in my mind, I pay very close attention to the data, but the test it does not measure what our kids actually know and can do. It's a multiple choice essay, done. It doesn't impact their life. They don't remember taking it. It doesn't do anything for them as they move on. It's a test, right? And we spend a whole lot of time looking at it, comparing ourselves, and I get it. I love data, so it's not that I don't, and I appreciate the information that I get. However, there are gifts that our students have, whether they're special education or general education, low income, high need, doesn't matter. They have gifts and they have ways in which they navigate life that is phenomenal. It's not measured on MCAS. So, right?
I agree, 100%.
So we'll take it and we'll keep moving and do what we need to do. But the value is really in the quality of their life when they leave. What are they going to be able to participate in? What choices will they have? So,
All right, we'll end on that note. Thank you, Dr. Schwam.
thank you.
Next up, we have Director of Finance Report, Kristen.
Good evening. In your packet, you have the February report, the February budget report. We are 8 months through, almost 8.5 months through the fiscal year, so we've spent a lot of time looking at the FY25 budget, so I wanted for this meeting to look more closely at the FY24 budget, as we do regularly through the meetings, and just, you'll see through the budget transfer, just some predicting of salary transfers that we need to even out things for the end of the year. So our typical areas that we have, I've discussed this, we do have some surplus in salaries due to the positions that either haven't been filled or we've chosen not to fill, or that we've hired at a lower rate than what was budgeted. So we will have some salary surpluses, and you see that reflected in the budget transfer. Areas of concern, as always, are the electricity at Wareham Elementary. That's part of the budget transfer. So we're taking a look at that. That will hopefully get us through the end of the fiscal year. There might have to be an additional transfer as we get to June, but I'll speak more about the budget transfers as well. Also, transportation contract services. We have had some additional students, some student change routes or placements that we need a budget transfer for our homeless and foster transportation and also our special ed transportation. And in fact, just today I saw an email for some additional foster student transportation. So this probably won't be the end of this for this year. Also, some home tutoring, special education home tutoring. That's an area that, again, like the other two, the Wareham Elementary Utilities and the transportation, all three of those have had some salary transfers already, will continue to, budget transfers. And those are all three areas that were increased in the FY25 budget when we looked at what our actual spending was. So those are the three main areas of concern. I'm sure that the schools are looking at their budgets and their line items and seeing where they're at with that, and see how we're going to make out for the end of the year. So they'll be looking at that and any of their needs that they might need before the end of the year. So I really don't have anything more specific to say about the year-to-date budget. I can certainly take questions, and we can move on to the budget transfers.
Any questions on the year-to-date budget? Okay, why don't you move on to transfer?
Okay, so you have the transfer. It's a rather lengthy transfer. However, like I said, instead of waiting till the end of the year in June and doing a lot of transfers, I had the opportunity to take some time to look at the salaries, and it's a real team effort. The payroll and the payroll bookkeeper and the bookkeepers in the business office, they do a great job of keeping current with the accounts and providing some information that we all can use. So looking at our projected balances for some of the salaries, that's what informed a lot of this transfer. I'll start at the top and we'll just go through. I'm not going to go through line by line unless you have specific questions, but I've broken it up into a few different sections. So at the very top, of course, you see the Wareham Elementary Utilities transferring into that to get us through, like I said, hopefully through the end of the year. There may be, depending on what we're seeing, we have seen a little bit of an uptick in the electricity bills for Wareham Elementary. I'm not sure at this point why, but we're a little bit higher than we were compared to the last few months last year. So this is hopefully going to get us through to the end of the year. And it looks like, looking at the middle school utilities, it looked like we were not on pace to expend that budget. So again, that's where the source of funds were transferring from middle school utilities to elementary utilities, and also using some custodian overtime that we have not had to, or likely will not have to use in the elementary school. The next set is transportation. So you see a few transfers of salaries within the director and clerical salaries, just to get us through to the end of the year. Some changes, would have taken place between what was budgeted a year and a half ago or so, into what actually we're going to come through to the end of June. And there's also the transfer for the McKinney-Vento and Foster students, and also special education students. So we continue, to get changes in transportation, additional students, and that's just something that's changing. It's constantly changing. So this will get us to fund what we think we're going to be for June. But like I said, just today I saw an email about some additional foster students that are requiring transportation that we've had to put out to bid. So that likely will change. The next section is student services, special education, home tutoring. We have the student services office has projected out what they think they're going to need for tutoring through the end of the year, and there were about $25,000 short at this point. So the transfer from that is going to come from collaborative tuition. That's an area we've had some in private and collaborative tuition. We have some students that have not attended placements or stopped attending or moved out. So that's another area, in addition to salaries, where there's some surplus. And I'm going to start looking more closely at the tuition. We've been paying some tuitions out of our circuit breaker account, so perhaps we can pay them out of the local budget and have that circuit breaker money more available for next year, which we're allowed to do, next year is obviously more our problem at this point than this year. So that's something, but in the meantime, I'm going to use some of that money to transfer to the student services home tutoring. And some of the students that have left their placements, they are the ones that are getting the home tutoring at this point. So it's just putting the money where those kids are. The rest of them are all salary transfers within salary accounts. So there's a few reasons for these. Last year at budget time, we were contemplating making some cuts that had to be made to positions. And so when we set the budget, we set it so that in anticipation of cutting some positions. And fortunately, that didn't have to occur due to the funds that we got in our budget and due to some other decisions that were made, choices that were made after the budget was set. And again, that is, doing the budget a year and a half in advance, those things happen. So that's one of the reasons, so you'll see that. Another reason is the way in which I budgeted for the department heads and the academic directors and the deans versus the teacher salaries. So I budgeted for their full salary in that academic director account. But in actuality, in the payroll every week, a portion is coming out for their stipend related to that, and then the rest is to their teacher salary. So that's why you see such a large transfer from that academic director and department head into teacher salaries, because there was a mismatch between where I budgeted and where it actually comes out of. So it's just correcting where it should have been budgeted. And that's been taken into account for next year as well. So that has already been fixed. I'm gonna double check that, but it has been fixed. Another area is just some areas, again, like I said, sometimes the cuts that we were going to make or where we had to make those cuts. And so this is just sort of a mismatch between where things were budgeted and where they actually are coming out. So that's, a high-level summary of the budget transfers. Again, most of them are within, you see the department heads and teacher salaries. There's some paraprofessionals. Some of that, the paraprofessionals contract was settled after the budget was set. And so some of that may have come into play there. And also I see that there was, like I said, another mismatch between, so at the elementary school, the salaries were budgeted more towards the regular ed paras and they should have been special ed. So things of that nature, and these are just the corrections that need to be made so that we don't incur salary deficits throughout the year in any one line item. So it's just within salary accounts. Does anyone have any questions on those?
Jeff? It is the lengthiest list of transfer requests I've ever seen. I'm not saying they're not appropriate by any means. I don't have the in-depth knowledge that you do. I am really surprised that more than half of them are salary accounts. That's not normal. So that, I don't know if the word concerns is correct. That surprises me anyway, if it doesn't concern me. The process of making a transfer, obviously you have to decide it's the right thing to do. Do the principals ever request transfers?
They do.
They do?
They do.
What
They do.
percentage of the transfers that we're looking at are actual requests, not because you've identified a problem and want to solve it, but because principals have actually, or directors have actually said, I have a budget problem, I think I need to make a request, and I assume in many of those cases, they're not necessarily requesting money come from another place for which they're responsible. They actually wanted to come from somebody else so they can solve a problem within their own department. So what is the typical process for a transfer request being made?
So, to answer your first question, in this group of transfers here, and actually, at the end of the year, last year in June, the transfer request was several pages long.
Yes, but
So I hope that this one page is more indicative of that.
I didn't hold you responsible for that because you were brand new, basically.
Right,
It wasn't
right.
your budget.
So, right. So I will say, so for your second question, in this group here, there was one, it was the Student Services Home Tutoring that was requested from the Student Services Office. So they complete a form and they identify what account they want to transfer out of and what they want to transfer into.
Oh,
And so-
they actually balance it on their own?
They do. Yes, they do. And, you know, sometimes we talk about it, which accounts would be better or not, and they'll send me this, and whether it's a transfer that can be done without school committee approval because it's within the function code and it's lower than 25,000, then we'll just go ahead and do it. If not, it waits for the school committee meeting. So some of these other ones here, they weren't, most of these weren't necessarily accounts that the principals or directors would be keeping track of or watching. Utilities is something that I do in my office, and the bookkeepers assist me with that. Transportation, salaries is the principals and the directors, they don't really have much control over the salaries per se. So, and also the contract services for transportation, those are line items that I'm watching. And then, of course, salaries, and like I said, the good portion of these were the effect of, and I will pick, you know, I don't want to identify any specific cuts that were being considered, but there were 2 line items here that we were cutting or we did cut that didn't either need to be made once we found we didn't need to do that, but the salary line item had already been cut. So in other words, but we held on to the position, we were able to hold on to that position. And in one section, that position, you know, we've lost that position in this year. So it was the plan that we had. We deviated from it, and that was okay, because we were able to make it through this year with it. In another area, like I said, it was a mismatch between, you know, where I put the money for those department heads that were acting as teachers. So a portion of their salary is paid from one line item, and the other is paid from another. I put it all into one, and in actuality, it's coming out of the payroll in a different way. So that's something that I need to do a better job at communicating, like where the funds were budgeted and match it to where, you know, we're gonna set the payroll over the summer. So that's something, like I said, I've already identified that and have changed to budgeting it so it's in the stipend area and in the regular salary area. So those were the major ones. And some of the other ones, like I said, are some of the paras. It was a difference between special ed and regular ed. It's the same salary line. I just had to do a better job of knowing who the special education paras were versus who the regular education paras are. And that's something that, you know, just comes with more familiarity with the staff and with the budget. So, you know, I'm confident that I can say we're not gonna have, I don't wanna say we won't have any transfers next year, because in $30+ million budget, it's nearly impossible. But I can say that each year, I hope, will be a little bit better.
Is it fair to say that, because there's an expression that a budget is an expression of the priorities and maybe even the philosophy of the entity, of the management, is it fair to say that none of this represents a reprioritization of education in Wareham Public Schools?
I would say so. I would say so, because when I do the transfers, I do try to look very closely at matching up the line items to keep that priority. So you'll see, you know, where possible with the utilities, okay, well, we budgeted not enough at the elementary school, but too much at the middle school. So that's, you know, so that's an example of trying to do it that way.
No,
Same thing, so that's why I grouped it this way, so that hopefully it was clear that the transfers were, you know, so we have a little bit more, as we've talked about, in transportation driver salaries, but we need it in contract services, so it stayed within transportation, so as not to, deviate too much from the plan. And same thing with
I get
salaries,
it.
tried to keep it with
Question for,
teacher and paras.
question for the superintendent. Have you ever denied a transfer request? Because you just didn't like the fact that this area was losing money?
Not in this district, I haven't.
Not in this district. Okay. I'm all set, thank you.
Do we have a motion to accept the transfers as presented?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? 500. Thanks, Kristen. All right, superintendent's report is next.
Okay, thank you. You all have the superintendent's newsletter in your packet. I ask first that you vote to approve the bill and payroll warrants.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? 500. Thank you.
Okay, we have a school committee meeting scheduled for June 13th. We have learned that this room is going to be occupied with another meeting on that date, and I would like to request that we move that meeting from June 13th to June 20th. So I ask that you consider that and vote to change the calendar and move that meeting to the 20th.
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion, questions? All
When
in,
is the last day of school, as of right now? Okay, thank you.
all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? 500.
Thank you. Okay, so last meeting I presented the current budget situation for FY '25. And you should have in front of you, or had in front of you, a document that looks like this, and you probably recognize it from the presentation that I have done this year at a couple of meetings, actually. And first of all, I want to share some good news, is that Derek has informed me that he's going to increase the amount of money that we'll be receiving from the town by $121,004. So you'll see that next to, in the column next to the highlighted number, it's not $1 million, but it's $1,121,004 that we'll be receiving from the town. So what I'm asking tonight is that you revote the FY '25 budget to the number that's highlighted there, $34,631,313. That is a 3.34% increase from FY '24.
Any questions? April?
So, do we know right now where the $2,318,743 cuts are going to be coming from?
We have a draft plan for where those cuts will come from. And when I say draft plan is because we're always looking at how we can do things differently, at ways in which we might be able to find more money. So the plan has changed, from its first draft. But we do have a plan for how those cuts will be made, yes.
And this is still not incorporating any of the units that are in current negotiations right now?
That is correct.
We have, what, 3 in negotiations?
We have 3. We have units A and B that are currently in negotiations, and Unit D that will need to be negotiated after that.
You did do a presentation at our last meeting, right? That you gave a general overview of
Yes.
where those.
Yes.
Right, I'm just, whereas it's now, it's a different amount and it's to be voted, I just, because now we're actually voting on it, I'd
Sure.
like to know exactly what I'm voting to basically cut. I mean, yes, we accept money, obviously, because that's what we need to function, but I just like to wrap my head around what we'll be losing more than what we'll be gaining, because I think that's more important. So it's, without knowing, obviously I know you did present things before, but we didn't vote at that time, I don't think.
No, but the
No.
changes would be the same,
Right.
right?
From the same general areas or the same buckets, kind of the same things.
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly.
The only thing I would say is that we normally vote a net, a non-net, and then a total number. Is that?
Correct. Because we don't, because based on where the cuts come from for the $2.3 million cuts, that we don't know exactly what those numbers are gonna be just yet.
Okay.
So, it's okay for the school committee to just vote a one overall budget number.
Okay.
But is it fair to say that at some point, we will need to vote both numbers, net and non-net and total? I've never, in many, many years, not done that.
In my previous district, we didn't do it that way. We just voted, the school committee, I should say, voted just the overall number. However, if it makes the committee more comfortable, we can certainly vote that
To me, it's
later.
not an issue of comfort, it's an issue of what is required with respect to a school budget. And if it hasn't been necessary for all these decades, okay, fine. So would you clarify that before we actually end the school year?
I will, yes.
So can I help with that? The budget policy is in our packet, right? So while we were talking earlier, I did look at it, and it doesn't say, it just says that the school committee will vote a budget. It does not say that the school committee will vote net, non-net, and total. Yeah, I agree, since I've been on the school committee, we've always done it, but it doesn't say that in the policy.
And I was thinking it might go beyond the policy, that it might actually have something to do with the budget process as conceived by the state. Now, interestingly enough, if we didn't have our own transportation department, then, and we had an external, would that just be an expense? I don't know the answer, and I'm literally asking the question because we're deviating from past practice. So I'm perfectly happy voting tonight on this overall number, as long as at some point we know for certain that it's not necessary.
I will confirm, absolutely.
So that being said, do we have a motion to accept the total budget of $34,631,313?
The motion is fine, but I have just one more comment after
Okay.
you take the motion.
So moved?
Okay,
Second.
all right. Jeff, your comment?
I don't think it should be lost on anybody who's observing as well as ourselves, that the town administrator came forward with a better than 10% increase on the amount he was giving the school committee. He did not have to do that. We don't know his numbers. We don't know that he had $121,004. He used to be a finance person. That's why the level of precision. But he did come forward, and that kind of courtesy and collaboration with us shouldn't go unnoticed. So I think everybody should understand that. But April's point is extremely well taken. $1,021,000 is dwarfed by the $2.3 million that we have to cut, and that number is not as much as we will ultimately have to cut when we finish the negotiations process. I appreciate what April is saying. It's a tough situation, and I think it should not be lost on the fact that we are trying to continue the upward trajectory of our academic results, and at the same time cutting the amount of money that we're devoting to the process. That's an extraordinary situation for people like our staff and our superintendent and assistant superintendent, it's a very difficult environment, and that should not be lost as well. But I do think, unfortunately, it is what is necessary.
Thank you. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Aye, for conflict of interest purposes, so 401.
I have a couple other things, Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Sure, go ahead.
So we will be, Kristen and I will be going to the FinCom meeting on Wednesday evening to present the FY25 budget to the FinCom. And I don't want to speak for Jeff and Joyce, but I do believe that the Budget Subcommittee will be there also in support. And of course, everyone else is welcome. So we'll be reporting that, we'll be presenting that Wednesday. I also wanted to share some good news, some more good news, that our preschool team, Wendy Owens, Mary Morgan, along with the principal Bethany Chandler, applied for a grant called the Commonwealth Preschool Partnership Initiative and Implementation Grant, and they received the grant. It's for a total of $410,000. Now, what is that for? They just learned of this on earlier this week, and so I'm not going to have a lot of details, so don't ask me any questions. But I can tell you this, that the intent of the grant, or the purpose of the grant, is to have our preschool team partner with local preschools to ensure that the children have access to high-quality programs and education. So what they're going to do is they will partner with the preschools in town that feed into our preschool or into our kindergarten, and provide them with support to help those students be better prepared when they come into kindergarten. For the remainder of this year, they're going to identify the partnerships, develop a leadership team, and complete a needs assessment. And then for next year, they need to develop a strategic action plan and then implement that plan throughout FY25. So I think it's, congratulations to them, and I thank them for their initiatives to apply for this grant. It's going to be something that is going to benefit us and our students in a way that allows for our students to be better prepared coming into kindergarten and hopefully have better success throughout their academic career.
Great.
Great news.
Thank you. All right, April, you are up with school committee reports on policies. Take it away.
Right, so the Policy Review Committee met at the beginning of the month, and I will just go through the policies that are in the packet in the order that they are. So the first policy is measuring body mass index, excuse me, also known as BMI. So this was, we are replacing the first page of that and replacing it with the second page. The changes are highlighted, just with a note that BMI, this comes down to the school district from the Department of Health regulations and DESE. I personally don't think it should be a school's business, and I made this very apparent in that meeting. I don't think it's a good thing if we're worried about social emotional health to be having children's BMI be brought up to their attention. I think that should be personally between the child, their family, and their doctor. But this comes down from the Department of Public Health and DESE, so the only other change was that it was once listed that the school nurse would make a monthly report to the superintendent, but we voted to just say upon request, if the superintendent, this was his suggestion, that if he needed the report from the nurse, he could ask for it and they would provide it, instead of them just randomly giving it to him monthly. So I'll just entertain a motion to accept the changes to that policy.
I actually have a question about that policy. So this is instead of the BMI policy, but this policy talks, the new policy talks a lot about school athletic teams and physicals required, and it says the school physician will examine athletes, except when a family wishes to have the examination done by their own doctor. I don't believe that that's done.
Well, so when the athletes, they have to have a physical form to play the sports, or I believe that if they do not have like a primary care doctor, I don't necessarily know that it's the school physician, but I do know that they can go to like the local urgent care and get a physical form
Right,
filled
but
out.
but this doesn't say that. This says the school physician will examine athletes.
This is literally just given to us
I believe
from-
if in a circumstance where a child didn't have, doesn't happen often, doesn't have a doctor, that our doctor would indeed, that would be part of his responsibilities to provide a physical for that child.
I'm not convinced that that's the case. I wish it was, but I know of a case in the fall where a student couldn't get his own physical and he wasn't going to be able to play.
This makes it sound like the school physician is the first course of action.
Yes.
And then parents can opt out of that to do their own.
Was there an effort to have this?
No. It eventually happened. It's a long story.
Is
But-
there a school physician?
What's that? I'm sorry.
Well, kind of, right? So when we say the school physician, I'm just going back to, remember the beginning of COVID? We didn't really know who the school physician was. Do you have interaction with the school physician?
I have.
Yeah. I just don't believe, just from my own experience at school, and like I said, I know of this case in the fall, that this isn't what actually happens. If maybe you're going to put it in place, but it doesn't.
So in my previous district, I did have a circumstance where I had students, I referred students to our district physician for physicals.
But this doesn't say that we will refer them. This says the school physician will examine athletes, except when a family wishes to have the examination done by their own doctor, which is kind of the opposite of when it can't be done by the family doctor, then you'll refer.
Right.
So changing the wording.
But you're right, most families just have their family
Yeah.
doctor do it.
Yeah, and
Right.
unfortunately, that doesn't always happen.
So are
and-
you suggesting like the school physician can, instead of will, examine athletes when a family is unable to have the examination done by their own doctor?
No, I would say take the whole thing out.
The
I
whole
mean,
sentence
so
out?
the policy that this is replacing doesn't mention this at all. Doesn't mention athletic physicals at all.
Yeah, this was on the mask.
No, I understand
straight
that.
from MASC.
I
Yeah.
totally understand that, but this just goes above and beyond in ways that we don't, unless we're.
Unless we're planning on having doctors available before every sports season,
Right.
which is what they used to do way back in the day.
Interesting.
Yeah, Kevin, I don't know, we're talking way back in the day now when we're saying, when you and I say way back in the day.
I mean, in the 70s.
You're looking to just have the sentence where it says the school physician stricken and leaving that every candidate for, because this is also, the BMI is just being incorporated into the physical examination of students policy.
Well, I think we'd have to look at the physical exam. Is there another policy that addresses athletic physicals?
Jamie?
I don't
I
know.
believe, so this would be the only one where there's a mention of this.
Do you want to table this and I can
Yeah, so
do a little
if-
more homework? on
Yeah,
it?
I just don't want to say that we're going to do something that we don't.
All right, let me do a little homework.
Agree.
and answer.
Okay, so we'll table that. So the next one, this is again, this is
Wait.
some,
Just a quick point. You may want to discuss between now and the time you come back, because I think Joyce is dead on, from my own experience as a coach, that talk to Scott and Ed about this process. Because in 21 years, I've never had the school physician do it. I've had people end up at urgent care. I've had certainly plenty of them through the pediatrician. It's always one of the bane of existences of a coach is getting that physical in time so that they can actually participate in the first practice.
Yep.
If I knew there was a school physician, I
Right.
would have said, hey, Go to the school physician if you're having trouble scheduling, which is not always easy, a physical, because I don't really want, because I suspect there's an expense that is not necessarily insignificant associated with going to urgent care. So I think it's not an unimportant subject that has been, however accidentally, brought to our attention, because I think Joyce is 100% correct.
Write that down somewhere.
I just,
I second that, I second that.
I just wanted to say that if we need somehow then to make it equitable,
Yeah.
right? So we have to put pressure on somewhere in order to make sure that kids that want to play have access so that they can. So I'm wondering, like that second.
Well, I mean, outside of this policy, though, we have so many people who work in our schools who go above and beyond to make
Right.
those. Like Jeff is saying, he helped
Yep,
students out, I'm sure, pointed them in the right direction, did what you had to do, and we have many
True.
people in our schools who will do that.
yeah.
But, Jamie, could you make it 98%, not 100%?
Okay, so the next policy is, this one is given to us directly from the town. And this is just to add that we had nothing to add, nothing to change. This is just like, this was just like a housekeeping.
FYI.
Yeah, this was just more or less a housekeeping policy for the controlled substances, alcohol use and testing policy from the town of Wareham. So it's very long, it's very detailed, and this was voted to just accept as is because this is just to keep us consistent with the other departments in the town.
So does this allow us, if we're celebrating, to have a bottle of wine?
No.
Who's-
What we do on our own
who's
time is our own
we?
time, Jeff. Where, whatever you do at home, however much.
No, I was
vino
talking
you
about a
choose.
bottle of wine right here to celebrate 2 consecutive state championships.
I think not in a town building. But yeah, so I would entertain a motion to.
You know, with the
accept
kids who
this
aren't legal
policy.
aged.
Right, for the teenagers.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, 500.
Okay, so the next policy is the Wareham School Committee meeting minutes. And this was just updating to have the word tape recorder, since no one uses one, to the word to record for the minutes. And just that the information will be delivered in a timely manner instead of putting more pressure on Jamie to make sure that everything is transcribed by the next meeting. And again, just changing the words tape recorder to recording device, and that hard copies would be, of executive sessions, would be distributed at that meeting for perusal of each committee member.
Excuse me, did anybody notice that the policy we just voted is dated 2000?
2000, I did.
Yeah.
It hasn't been amended since
2005. Correct.
And, well, mine says August 8, 2000.
No, November 2005 is on the bottom of the packet from the town.
Okay. It's really old, and it's hard to believe it hasn't been amended.
Maybe they don't have such a good policy subcommittee as we do.
So do we have a motion to accept the Wareham Committee meeting minutes policy?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, 500.
Okay, so the next document is in line with that, and that was the distribution of meeting minutes. And it was just adding the words electronic copies, since now we get our school committee packet by email. So it was just adding that word to make it more up to date with what we do for our meetings. That was the only change.
Motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, 500.
Okay, and so the hiring policy is the next policy. We took the language from something else that was already an existing discrimination policy, so that the language mirrored that, and that was the only change, just to make sure that the language from the discrimination policy and this policy, when it came to referencing discrimination, was the same.
Motion to approve? Anybody?
So moved.
Okay, so moved. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Abstain.
I don't know who said, sorry.
I seconded it and she moved it.
Yes. Yeah, that's okay. Can I just ask a question, a general question? So that policy, when you're going through the policies, does someone also look at the updated mask policy?
Yes,
They're all
and the
connected.
MGL.
I
Okay,
went through every single one and I updated.
Yep.
okay, thank you.
Andrea saves my butt. Andrea and Jamie. I'd be lost without the two of them at every meeting. So the next policy is the goal statement policy, and this was, we were just replacing language to, of the promise to align with the 2026 goal statement within the strategic plan. So it was just, the changes are just updating the goals that were listed to align with what our mission statement currently is and the vision of the graduate, et cetera, so that everything is in line with the strategic plan.
So, sorry, is it just a copy and paste from the
Yes.
strategic plan of the goals that are in there?
Yep.
That you've already approved, which I thought would be helpful.
Motion to approve?
So moved?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstained. 500.
Okay, the not last policy, the next policy is the districting areas. This was, as Matt pointed out, this is something that is kind of obsolete to us now, but we'd rather just keep the policy in place as opposed to possibly having to reintroduce it in the future for now. This was more when the town had more neighborhood schools than we do the one big, more regionalized elementary school especially. So it was just, again, just voting to keep it as is as opposed to removing it. So just to, motion to accept as is.
So moved?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Abstained. Check. 500.
Okay, so the next one is Jeff's favorite. It's the budget policy. So most of the changes with this, this was a typing, change. Lowercase b, because for some reason the budget was given a very bougie capital B in the second sentence. We know it's important, but it didn't need to be that important. And then the other changes were with DESI line item function codes, and just making sure that those were updated with, which Matt referenced with Kristen ahead of the meeting, so that our the budget line items matched correctly in this policy.
We have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Seconded?
All in favor?
Correct. Just a quick question.
Yep.
This, and I'm not asking April, I'm asking the superintendent. Under the instruction 2000s DESI function code, this supervisory, non-supervisory terminology, and this may be unfair to ask you, but could you help me with understanding that distinction? Because frankly, all our department heads, I think it's accurate to say, Andrea, are supervisory. So what is, and directors are all supervisory. So why do we even have, or is this so generic that it doesn't need to apply to us?
It's not every school that does it that way.
So we're just using a policy that DESI wants, and the fact that it doesn't apply to us is irrelevant.
For that particular line item, it just might be a line item that we don't use personally in our budget, but it's just in case there was ever a time that it exists because DESI wants it to be there. And since they are the purse holders, I think we just do what they tell us to do.
So is it accurate to say we don't use 2120?
We may, I've got to look, and again, that might be some of those little mismatches that have occurred over the years as DESI's changed things or as we've changed things. So in this case, that 4-digit code is how DESI wants schools to report and categorize expenditures on the end of
Understood.
year report.
Right.
So here, they're making a distinction between curriculum directors and department heads who supervise and those who don't supervise. So, you know, I would really have to take a look and just kind of sort out to see if there are any of the budget codes 2120 and perhaps change them if necessary.
And that's all I'm asking. If we're
Right.
gonna have a policy, if we're gonna approve it, let's make sure we don't use a code, we don't even have that's inappropriate.
So these are all of the DESI codes. This is straight from, if you Google Department of Education Chart of Accounts. So this is all of the possibility. So there's a lot on here that we're not using.
That's
You know,
fine.
some of them, one of them is in the higher up, in the 7,000s and the 5,000 accounts that we may or may not use.
Okay,
So we had a motion and a second. I'll just ask for a vote again. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstained? 500.
Okay, the next policy was the domestic violence leave policy, and the only change to this policy was removal of the word "or" between annual and vacation in the first paragraph after the enumerated bullets.
good catch.
Motion to accept?
So moved?
Second?
Second?
Any questions? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? 500.
And then the last policy is the Chapter 74 admissions policy, and the changes to this, where we kind of just took out the org chart so that it wasn't constantly having to be updated. Took out the name of the previous superintendent and just wrote the org structure of the superintendent of schools with the generic district phone number, again with the high school registrar phone number as opposed to name, as that has also changed. And then just removing any personal items, but keeping the titles of the positions. So the principal and the Chapter 74 director, should any of those positions change, we wouldn't have to change the policy to reflect that anytime there's a shift in the org structure. So it was just time to make it a little bit more streamlined, and then updating the phone number for the registrar for the high school.
So I just had a question on this.
Yes, go ahead.
Am I the only one that, when I read this, it seems like there's an admissions process for Chapter 74? Well, the only Chapter 74 program at the high school is DECA, marketing, right? But it implies that there's a process, and as far as I know, the only process is that you enroll in a class.
But we're required to have a process
Okay.
by the Chapter 74 and Perkins.
Okay,
So we say to them all of the time, we accept everyone,
right.
right?
So really, that's,
but they technically always ask us to have a policy indicating our process.
okay.
Yeah,
I understand, no one is being denied
no.
admission, okay. All right.
So just entertain a motion to accept those changes.
So moved?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? 500.
And that is it for policy review. We have one more meeting and next month, and that will be the final one of this school year, and then I will report back at the following meeting.
So I just have 2 items under any other business. First is the superintendent evaluation is coming up. On March 31st, Dr. DeAndrea will give us his self-assessment that all members will receive.
On Easter?
You will have,
That's dedication. No deviled eggs for you.
You will get bonus points if you give it to us in an egg.
and then
Dress like a bunny.
committee members will have until April 12th to get me their written evaluations, send it to me electronically. So I will give you all the forms for that. And if you have any questions, you can contact me, please, and we'll try to guide you through the process. I'll try to give you as much information as I can. And we will then have the very comfortable public presentation of the evaluation on April 25th. Okay? And the last thing I'd like to do is to recognize and remember David McKinnon. David McKinnon was an educator in Wareham for 34 years. Started out as a junior high teacher. He was a high school vice principal and principal, was assistant superintendent, and then ended his career as superintendency of schools. He passed away recently, so I'd like to just have a brief moment of silence for, as I remember him, Mr. McKinnon. Thank you. Does anyone have any other business? Jeff?
I just want to remind the chair and the superintendent, the town treasurer has literally asked us to create an investment committee for the Parks Scholarship. So at some point, we need to put it on the agenda.
I think we'll do that on April 4th? 4th. Okay, we'll put it on the April 4th agenda. Okay, do
Adjourn.
I have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 500. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.